Hey there everyone. For the lab guidance this week, we are going to run through the process to inlet the trigger guard and to do all of the initial shaping on our stock. When we're inletting the trigger guard, it's important that we start on the end towards the barrel of the gun. We want to start there and kind of drop the back end into place once we get the front end inlet. If your kit is like mine, it will be just about perfectly fit already, so there's not a whole lot of work to do. Now, since the fitment was so close for me right off the bat, I decided not to shave away anything from the stock. Instead, I used a little bit more of an aggressive flat file to evenly take brass off of each side of the trigger guard, and I just kept on attempting to fit until I got it nice and snug, but again without putting any undue lateral stress on the wood where it sits. So it should be tight, but should not be pushing outward or stressing the stock at all. Once I was satisfied with the fit on the front end, I moved to the rear end of the trigger guard. I started out by using a sharp pencil to delineate the outline of the rear end of the trigger guard, and this let me know how close to shave with the chisels. If you go this route, just keep in mind you don't want to cut into or violate your pencil line. You just want to cut right up to it. Now the rear end of the trigger guard is a little bit different. It takes considerably more work to fit than the front end. So after I chiseled to open up the groove there, I utilized a little bit of everything, sandpaper and a file to make sure that the area I was working on in the stock was consistent and straight. And then I also shaved the brass down using that aggressive file on either side of the trigger guard and the back side as well. Taking a little bit off of both surfaces allowed me to get a very, very close and precise fit. The only thing I can suggest is, as you're going through this process, remember to test fit it often. Again, we want it nice, snug fit, nothing causing any stress to our stock. And once you get down close to a good fit, it's time to break out the inletting black again and apply some there, test fit, see where your contact points are, and just shave super lightly with your chisel just to get that last fine fitment in place. Before you take your chisel to the stock, I should also reiterate that you want to take real fine shavings off, so pay close attention to the direction of the grain. If we chisel in the wrong direction here, it's real easy to get up under the fibers and cut more than you want to away. So as long as you are cutting with the fibers, you should be able to maintain those really fine shavings. At the butt end of my stock, I had a significant amount of brass overhang. You can remove that using hand tools and blend it together if you choose. For me, I used my oscillating spindle sander with really great effect. It was easy to maintain both sides equally and maintain the rounded edge at the point that I wanted to. Now this is really my favorite part of the entire process. It's the part that involves the most woodworking and customization. And it's also the part where you'll see your stock really coming together here. Everything is going to flow together nicely, and you're going to start to see a vision of your finished product. So to begin, keep in mind certain concepts here. We want everything to flow together nicely, almost so it all looks like one unified piece. And the way we get there is just shaving away, for me, using a more aggressive flat-sided file. Did great to remove both the brass and the wood and get them down to the same level and flowing together at the same angle. Take long, smooth strokes as you're going, and that'll keep everything flowing together like you want. Now, once you get that bottom corner fitted together nicely, you're going to need to do some more extensive work on the sides and the top of your stock. For this job, I chose a Sureform plane. I have two of them there that I showed. One's a two-handed model, one's a one-handed model. The one-handed worked just fine for me. Again, use long strokes, apply even pressure, and again, pay close attention to the direction of the wood fiber if you decide to go with a plane like this. If you use light but even pressure, you can cut across the grain without too much worry, but there's a risk those little teeth are going to bury in there and bury under some fiber. So just take care. If you feel it bite, it's not too late. Don't keep pushing it. You can pull it off and use a file or something finer to sort of work it down. You can even just change directions with the plane and start working with the grain and work it down that way. Just listen to your project, listen to the feel of the wood as you're working with it. If you feel it bite, if you feel it dig in, then it's a good place to stop, pull it back out, take a look at what's going on there and see what else you can do before making a mistake that you'll end up regretting. So as you're going with the plane, remember to step away, look at it from a distance, move from one side to the other, check both sides, check different angles. And something else that I do, I like to feel it with my hands. So I run your hands over either side, make sure everything's feeling the same, equal on either side. Make sure the curves are flowing together nicely. We want long, smooth curves, not short, drastic changes in thickness. And work at the areas that you see sticking out, or areas that appear to be inconsistent. Just, take it slow. Keep those principles in mind as you're going, and you'll really see things start to come together. Last little tip, when we're working with things like the planes that remove a lot of wood, we can work out a lot of stuff on the brass, but really try your best to avoid hitting the brass. Gouges, once they're there, we're not going to be able to get rid of them without changing shape too much. So just to take a lot of care around the brass edges when you get close. And once you're satisfied with the bottom and the sides of your stock, it's time to flip it over in the vise and start working on the top end. There was quite a bit of wood on my stock here to remove to get it blended in with the brass. One little tip I have as you're getting close to that edge, you should be taking care not to gouge or hit the brass anyway. But take a lot of care not to hit that little screw because we don't want to mess up our ability to uninstall this piece for working further down the line. And there you go. Through these pictures you can see how much finer the finish is going to look as you get going, as you get it worked down. Your original inletting job there might look a little rough, but really trust the job that you've done and the time you've put into the project. Once you get everything leveled out, it'll fit together real nicely. And after you get close to getting leveled out, take a file to it. Use a file, not one of the rasps, to get the wood of your stock and that brass really down on the same level, following the same curve. Make sure everything is flush and fitted together nicely. After you get to this point, it's time to break out the old sanding block and sandpaper. Either 100 grit or 150 grit should do fine for this job. And what we're doing here is just smoothing things down a little bit more. The block gives us the ability to take down any inconsistencies that we can't see, any high areas. It'll shave them down without hitting the low areas. If you use just your hand on some sandpaper, you won't have that ability. So a block is essential to use here. For me now, I think I used 100 grit for working down more so than the 150 here. Like I said, either one will work fine, but it's just what worked for me. You get a little bit faster removal of material with the 100. And I did want to point out something here. So right there in the center photo, as you're sanding with the block, little almost imperceptible gouges that you might have made inadvertently with the hand planer earlier on, they will start showing up. So as you find them, well, keep your eye out for them first of all, and I like to address them as I find them. So what you do is you take your flat file when you find one of these gouges when they show through, and I put a hand on either end of the flat file and just kind of work it in a circular or figure 8 motion across and diagonal across the gouge every way that I can until I get the wood just about even, and then I hit it with the sanding block again. Once you get that gouge worked all the way down, hit it with the sanding block, you won't even be able to see it anymore. And it's really important that we eliminate these now at this stage rather than applying stain and finding them highlighting all of the little nicks and scrapes and gouges that we may have overlooked during the process. So again, take your time with this, use a sharp eye, let the wood talk to you. It'll show you while you're running with the sanding block where these little scrapes and gouges are, and just take them out one by one and keep on working. Okay, and once you're satisfied, go ahead and move on up to the points where the trigger guard connects to your stock. Use a flat file to kind of work the brass and the wood down to the same level at all the contact points. And also use your sanding block with about 100 grit, run from the wood up onto the trigger guard with about moderate pressure, and you'll really get a flush fit on all those points where they make contact with one another. Okay, and once you're pleased with that, flip the stock over on its sides and use your sanding block again just to make sure that there are no high spots or inconsistencies on either side of your stock at this point where the lock is inlet, and then on the back side of that. Mine was just about perfect already. I just used my block to make sure it was all fat, and use it a little bit around the edges just to make sure I was satisfied with those edge lines. Again, I really didn't have to change shape of this at all. I was pretty happy with the way everything was. This is more of a process on my kit, at least, just for cleaning up that surface and making sure those lines were clean and neat. Okay, moving on now to the top of the stock where our barrel comes together at the back end here. So again, a flat file is a tool for this job. At first, there was a decent amount of wood for me to remove there, right where the barrel comes in. Even pressure on both sides, one hand on either side of the file, with a more aggressive file at first, and I flipped over to the more the less aggressive side of the file as I got closer. And then as it got really close down, I switched to the sanding block with 100 grit sandpaper, and did a good job. Almost got it perfectly level the whole way across there. Alright, now the nose cap on my kit had some severe inconsistencies. So I had to do quite a bit of shaving with the aggressive side on the flat file to get those sides even and cut down close to the barrel channel. I got a little frustrated doing it. If you have to cut that much down as well, or you're dealing with the same inconsistencies, it can get frustrating. Just remember, this is a good time. Take breaks when you need them. Don't let it get you frustrated. Take your time. It'll work down. It's all worth it in the end. And during this process, or right after it, use your sanding block. I think I used 150 grit for this job. Run it up and down the barrel channel just to make sure that we are smoothed down. We get rid of any accidental tool marks, any nicks or anything like that on the edges of our barrel channel there. Sand both sides at the same time. Keep everything perfectly level and straight. Even pressure and long strokes because we want to keep those corners relatively sharp. And next up, we're working around the rear thimble there. This did take a little bit of work. Since the surface is all rounded here, we use a little bit different of a technique. I used a 4-way rasp for this one. I used the rounded file side of my 4-way rasp. It gave me better control for working around the rounded surface, especially at the midpoint of the thimble there where the elevation changes. I had to reduce the wood lip there to match the brass, and the rounded edge of the file was the ticket to getting that done. After you get everything filed down to where you got a good match and everything's fitting pretty flush, it's time to work with your sandpaper. But in this case, it's the opposite concept of using the sanding block. We want to use our hand here because we want to keep that round contour, which is very important. Using consistent pressure and relatively long strokes to keep everything smooth and consistent are the keys here. I told you I was getting frustrated with the fit of the nose cap here, and here's another little bit of what I was talking about. One side of the stock had a significant overhang while the other side had none at all. My nose cap is dead center, so this is inconsistencies in the thickness of the stock wood at the end that's creating this issue. Looking at it like this, I was a little bit intimidated. I didn't want a crooked stock. I didn't want to weaken any side of it, but after taking measurements and everything, it was clear to me that there was just extra wood left over on one side of the stock. So again, using just long, consistent pressure to work that one side down seems to have done the trick. And here we are, this last set of photographs for this week shows kind of how I was able to shave the wood thickness down on that treble side and get it, it's not perfect in my eyes right now. I'm not sure how much more I'm comfortable taking down, but I probably will as we move forward with the project. But yeah, around your edges for your stock here for a better appearance, and try to get as consistent as possible on either end of the nose cap here for best possible appearance. Again, as I said a million times, long strokes, starting my work back from about where my thumb is grasping the stock there, so I don't have any drastic reductions in thickness or anything like that, was the key. Aggressive file, flat file was the tool of choice for this job, and I finished it out with sanding block and 100 grit down to 150 grit sandpaper to get that kind of leveled out to where I wanted it. So as usual, if anybody has any issues, questions, feel free to get a hold of me. I'd love to talk it out. I hope everybody's enjoying the project so far.